Wife reveals that she's pregnant, but I know I'm not the father, because I'm sterile. So I play along. I, 38M, got married to my wife, 33F, 2 years back. We'd been dating for 3 years and she was more inclined towards marriage than I was, but just to make her happy, I agreed to it. Around a year ago, we started trying to have a baby. Again, that was at my wife's insistence. We struggled a lot during the period that we were trying to conceive, though, and things got so bad for my mental health that I decided to go get myself tested. My wife had become mean during the time that we were struggling to conceive, and I tried to deal with her behavior, but it was just too much to bear. So a few days after the test, I was told by the doctors that I was sterile. To be honest, that pretty much broke my heart. Even though having a baby wasn't my idea, I'd started envisioning my life as a father already, and I really wanted to be one, so to learn that I'd never be able to be a dad was the most devastating news to me at the time. But the worst was yet to come. I'd been trying to work up the courage to tell my wife that I was the reason that we weren't able to conceive, but I was afraid of how she'd react. She'd already been so mean to me, that I couldn't imagine her reaction when she'd find out that what she wanted was probably never going to happen with me. So I waited for a few days after I knew the results of my test to tell my wife, but she's the one who ended up giving me a surprise. 4 days after I knew that I was sterile, she sat me down and told me that she had some really important news to share with me, and I was extremely scared because I'd thought that she'd somehow found out about my sterility. But no, she wanted to tell me that she was finally pregnant. I was shocked to my very core at what she was saying, but, thankfully, she was blissfully unaware of my true feelings and began to celebrate almost immediately. I tried to join in on her happiness so that she wouldn't doubt me or whatever, but the very next day, I got tested again, just to confirm that I was really and truly sterile, and once again, I received the same results. I was at a loss because if I wasn't the father, then my wife was most certainly cheating on me. The medical procedures that she needed to conceive artificially were expensive, and since I was the only earning member between the two of us, she couldn't have gotten anything done without asking me for that sort of money first. So she was obviously cheating. The thought itself was so weird and horrible that I didn't do anything about it for the next few days while my wife planned a full-fledged party to announce her pregnancy. She seemed really happy and I was equally shattered, but I couldn't let it show on my face because I needed to get to the bottom of this whole situation. I didn't even tell my own family about what was happening and kept it all under wraps because this was way too uncomfortable and personal to be shared with anyone. I couldn't even tell my wife what I thought because firstly, way too much time had passed, and secondly, I wanted to know who exactly the father of her child was, because if I did confront her then maybe she'd just leave and I'd never know. Luckily, I found out on the day of the party itself. A lot of people attended, including our families, our friends, and a few of my coworkers. She also invited one of our neighbors, who lived right across the street from us. Our neighbor, 27M, is a young man and is definitely a lot better looking than me, no doubt. Not just me, but he's probably better looking than most people since he's a model, but he's still trying to make a name for himself in the modeling world. He moved in with his aunt, who owns the house he lives in, so that he's closer to the city since his own family lives really far away. My wife has always had a soft corner for this guy and would cook for him and his aunt when he'd moved in initially. He's even come over to our house for dinner a few times and we've chatted about his work. He's well spoken and well read as well, and he's also a literature major, like my wife, so they have a lot in common and hit it off instantly the first time they met. I never had anything against the guy since he seemed sweet enough and I trusted my wife, too. But when he entered the house on the day of our party and my wife's eyes lit up, I could sense that something had changed. She made a beeline for him as soon as he walked in and they hugged each other for longer than she'd hugged any of the other guests. Nobody else seemed to notice this, but I did, and I could tell that they had something brewing, but I just needed a way to confirm it. So I decided to excuse myself to go to the loo, but headed to the bedroom instead and opened up my wife's laptop. I'd been able to check her phone while she was asleep a few days after she told me she was pregnant, but I hadn't found anything suspicious. Getting to her laptop had proved to be a little more difficult since whenever I was home, she was constantly watching something or typing something on it. Whenever I'd ask her what she was doing, she'd turn the screen away from me and tell me that she was working on her novel. That had been going on for months and I'd respected her privacy because I'd actually thought that she was working on a novel. Now, the situation had changed and I was pretty sure that there was no novel and it was just an excuse to hide the contents of her laptop from me. Thankfully, there was no password or anything I had easy access to. After some digging, I was able to find another email account in addition to her real one. I switched to that one and went through the emails that had been sent and received. I went through those emails and they were full of confessions of love from my wife and also the other guy, our neighbor. I recognized the email address since he was using his real name. And in the more recent emails, she was telling him that she was pregnant. He didn't take it kindly and was upset about it, so the mail stopped for a while, presumably because he'd wanted to end things, but my wife wasn't going to let him go. Eventually, I got the worst email of them all, where she was telling him that she'd spoken to a friend of hers who is a lawyer and she'd help her file for divorce right after the baby is born. The reason she'd even tried to convince me to have a baby with her was so that she'd get both the alimony and the child support after the divorce so that she could take off with our neighbor a few months after and live happily ever after. I was horrified when I read that, and I can still feel the nauseating feeling take over me whenever I think about that email. Anyway, I quickly shook off whatever I was feeling and got back to work and took several pictures of the email on my phone before shutting it down and keeping it back where I'd found it. I was less concerned about the cheating and more disgusted by what my wife was trying to do. Cheating was one thing, but trying to trick me into having a child with her and then making me pay all that money just so she could fund her dream life with her struggling boyfriend was so psychotic. And the cherry on top was that she was such a great actress that I hadn't suspected a thing yet. Her happiness was almost disturbing, but I was so angry about all of this that I decided to go the extra mile and take my revenge. I'd made up my mind to play along, and then I dropped the bomb on her when she was least expecting it. There was no way I was going to let her just get away with it without feeling the hurt, betrayal, and frustration that I'd been feeling when I found out about her dishonesty. Call me a psycho, but I did what I had to do. So for the next 9 months, I played the perfect husband/father-to-be. It was tough knowing that she was lying through her teeth to me all this while, but the more she lied and pretended to be happy with me, the more it strengthened my resolve to see this through. I attended every meeting with her doctor and made sure she took all her vitamins on time and was the best husband that one could ask for. Then, finally, a few days ago my wife went into labor. I was extremely nervous because who wouldn't be in my situation? But I put that all aside and took her to the hospital all by myself. I'd called her parents already, but not mine, since I didn't want them present there in case things became too dramatic. Anyway, her parents had to drive for an hour to get to the hospital, so we had some time to ourselves, and that's when I chose to drop the bomb on her. Once she was safely inside the room, I told her that I was going to go out and call our neighbor so he could be here for her. She looked taken aback and stuttered a bit while saying that there was no need for that and she didn't want a stranger in the room while giving birth. So I smiled back at her and showed her the results of my fertility test along with the divorce papers, since I'd filed for divorce just a few days before her due date that I'd made sure to carry with me on that day. She went through all of it, still looking confused, so I explained to her that I wouldn't be able to impregnate her even if I'd wanted to, so the baby wasn't mine. Then, I told her about the emails that I'd found on her super secret account, and at that moment, she finally realized what was going on. The look on her face was priceless as I walked out and she struggled to come up with words. I thought I'd need to stay in the hospital myself too, because that's how fast my heart was beating when I finally walked out and called our neighbor up to inform him that my wife was in labor. I didn't even wait for his response and hung up as fast as I could. Then, I got into my car and waited for my wife's family to show up. As soon as I saw her dad's car pull up in the driveway, I got out of there as fast as I could. I even turned my phone off for good measure and drove for a while until I got to this motel a little out of town. I'd packed my bags already a few weeks ago and had them stashed in the boot of my car so that I had all that I needed with me and wasn't caught unprepared at any point. I spent the rest of the day watching television, drinking beer, and doing everything I possibly could to take my mind off of things. I went to sleep that night quite peacefully, knowing that I was finally done and dusted with this whole act. The next morning, I woke up and finally turned my phone on. Naturally, there were hundreds of texts from my wife and my neighbor, none of which I bothered to even open, but I did go through some texts that my parents and brother had sent me. I guess my wife had probably contacted them when she couldn't reach me, so I decided to call my parents back and speak to them. I told them that I'd be coming back home in a while and even told them to get my brother there, if possible, so that I could explain the entire situation to them, because they did deserve an explanation for what was happening. I drove to my parents' house and my brother was already there, all of them looking confused and kind of annoyed, which was but natural because to them, I just missed the birth of my own child and it also made them miss the birth of their grandchild. But I sat them down and explained the whole story to them and told them my reasons for what I'd done, and by the time I was done telling them, they were speechless. I was ready to be bombarded with questions and accusations, but nothing of the sort happened. All my dad said was that he hoped nothing worse would happen, and if the others had any other comments, they didn't say anything, so it was all chill on that front. That was a few days back, and while my family hasn't said much, my wife has gone above and beyond to accuse me of ruining her experience of becoming a mother for the first time. She's been trying to call me and text me ever since I left, but I haven't answered anything. Even my neighbor texted me a few hours ago, saying that my wife was really upset and that we should keep our differences aside for her sake and at least try to sort things out with her for once. I can't believe the audacity that these people have, still trying to talk to me and make it seem like this is some petty thing that I'm getting pissed about. He mentioned a couple of other things as well in his text, like how my wife had started to fall back in love with me during her pregnancy, which had been a shock for both of them as well, so I should at least try to give our marriage a second chance. I call BS on that, because if she'd started to fall for me again, then why was my neighbor still in the picture? I don't know why they think I'm that stupid. My wife is upset, but there's nothing I can do about it. She's mostly angry that I'd known everything right from the beginning but had chosen to be with her and put up with this whole act, and accused me of lying to her. Ida for staying with my wife throughout her pregnancy and misleading her despite knowing that the baby wasn't mine and she'd been cheating on me with our neighbor. Update 1. It's been close to a week since the baby was born and I've been staying in a hotel room. I haven't been over to see my wife yet, and neither do I plan on going either. She's still texting and calling me, but I don't know why, since I've made it pretty clear that I'm not interested in speaking to her or hearing her out. I haven't blocked her yet, but I have blocked my neighbor since he'd taken it upon himself to text me and remind me that my wife was still holding out hope and wanted me to get back to her. I'm 100% sure that the only reason he's still with her and trying to get me to forgive her is so that she'll at least get something out of the divorce settlement and the alimony, since both of them are basically unemployed. My wife was a stay-at-home spouse, which I appreciated and respected, but she wasn't just staying at home and doing the chores, she was also cheating on me behind my back, and that was unforgivable. And before anyone attacks me, I'm not the one who suggested that she quit her job after marriage. In fact, I was quite supportive of her back when we were dating and she used to work, but she's the one who said she wanted to quit and take care of our home instead, so I didn't stand against that either since it was her choice and I earned well enough. Anyway, I'm pretty sure my lawyer will be able to get me out of paying alimony once we can prove that she'd been cheating, which, I'm hoping, is going to be easy. As for my neighbor, he's still struggling to find well-paying modeling gigs, so handling his own expenses, my wife's expenses and a baby on top of that is going to be next to impossible for them even with all their money combined, so good luck to them. I'm just grateful that I'm out of this mess and won't have to give them anything, not even my attention. I just hope that my wife realizes that and doesn't waste more of my time by contesting the divorce. I'm hoping she won't, but then again, given the utter lack of brains, she might as well, so I'm prepared for that as well. The pictures of the emails that had been exchanged on her secret email account are still safely saved on my phone and backed up on my laptop, so I'm not too worried. Even if she decides to delete her account, she cannot delete those images that I have, and I know I'll be good to go. Worst comes to worst, I'll even pay her the alimony, but at least I won't have to be with her. She should count herself lucky. I'm giving her time to vacate our house by herself and haven't forcefully evicted her since the house is registered under my name. I'm hoping for the best now, and maybe this will blow over soon enough. Update 2, I was right, my wife's an idiot and has decided to negotiate since she wasn't happy with the settlement that I'd offered, which was basically just the amount that she'd spent during the course of the marriage, and even that felt pretty generous to me. I don't even understand what miracle she thinks is going to happen, but whatever, good for her. She texted me yesterday saying that she'd vacated the house today, and I went back happily, thinking that she'd probably moved in with her parents or something, but was super disappointed to learn that she'd just moved across the street into our neighbor's house and I'd still have to see her and her boyfriend's faces every single day now. I even considered going back to living in a hotel but didn't, since this was my house and I had every right to live wherever I wanted to. I wasn't going to pack up and go just because they were going to make me uncomfortable. I did wonder why my wife hadn't gone to live with her parents instead, since living with our neighbor was going to negatively impact the divorce case and she was just making the situation worse for herself. But I didn't have to think too hard, because while scrolling through all the unread messages that I'd received from multiple people so far, I also noticed one from my wife's father. I hadn't responded to several people who had texted me in the past few days, and his message had also gotten lost in it. It was a long text about how sorry he was regarding what his daughter had done and told me that they were strongly against her actions. Her father was saying these things, so it meant a lot to me and validated my emotions so much that I could feel tears coming on but held back. Anyway, he apologized for my wife's behavior and told me that he'd cut her off since she'd told him that she wanted to contest the divorce. So far nothing that my wife was doing made any sense to me at all, since everything that she'd done was eventually going to backfire, and surely even someone like her had the good sense to realize that. Either she's just really stupid or she still has some sick and twisted tricks up her sleeve. I'm hoping it's not the latter, but then I wouldn't put it past her. She is pretty much the worst. This living arrangement is definitely going to lead to some complications, and I'm sure they'll try to make me uncomfortable or jealous, but I'm determined not to let them get under my skin and provoke me, because they're definitely going to use that against me. All things considered, I'm still saving a fortune since I don't have to live in a hotel. So, it's been a month since the negotiations for my divorce settlement began, and so far, it's going pretty badly for my wife. I've been able to prove that she'd been cheating on me. Update 3. So, it's been a month since the negotiations for my divorce settlement began, and so far, it's going pretty badly for my wife. I've been able to prove that she'd been cheating on me, and she'd even made my job easier by moving in with the guy I'd accused her of cheating on me with, so there was no question about the validity of my claims. She tried to make up some false accusations about how I was an alcoholic, which is also why I was sterile, and that's why she'd gone ahead and had an affair since when we were trying to conceive. I'd become really cruel and bitter towards her, but that was all disproved quite easily since everyone knew I'd quit drinking last year when we decided to start trying for a baby, and haven't touched alcohol since. Again, I don't know why she thought that would work, and it was pretty damn stupid on her part. I guess she was just grasping at straws since her initial plan had failed miserably, and now, she was too busy being a mother to be a scheming mastermind. She was too busy and her baby daddy was too stupid, so there they were. By now, both of us are well aware of the fact that the chances of her walking away with any alimony at all are very slim, and I guess she must have told her boyfriend this since a few days ago. She was quite unceremoniously kicked out of his house with her baby. Yeah, that's right. I heard a lot of screaming and shouting from their house, and then, within minutes, I saw my wife and her son being pushed out of the house while the father screamed absolutely disgusting things about her and called her every name in the book. I was watching all of this happen from my living room, and the second I saw him shove my wife out while she was carrying the baby, I rushed out to help. Enmity be damned, I couldn't let a poor innocent baby suffer for something that isn't even his fault. By the time I reached his doorstep, he'd already slammed the door shut while my wife and her son were both sobbing. I carried the baby and grabbed my wife's hand so that I could lead them back to my house across the street and then called my father-in-law up so that he could take her home. Within an hour, he showed up and took her away, once again, thanking me for all that I'd done. During that 1 hour, my wife had been crying like a baby herself, so I'd basically been calming both mother and child down myself. I wanted to call the cops as well, but she managed to persuade me to let it go since she didn't want more trouble. She was apologizing again and again for whatever had happened and told me that she'd been so desperate to be with the one she loved that she'd lost all her self-respect and morals, and she was truly sorry about all of it. She told me she'll accept whatever happens and isn't going to negotiate anymore, so the divorce is finalized faster. I guess that's one good thing. I hope she decides to press charges eventually on this though and heals herself as well. But at least I did whatever I could and was a decent person, and I don't regret anything.